And as I had promised earlier, we are having a conversation on the recognition of prior learning. And joining me for this particular conversation on my immediate left is Dr. Alice Kande. She is the Director General, Kenya National Qualifications Authority. And right next to her is Peter Njiro. Peter Njiro is the Head of Registration and Accreditation, National Industrial Training Authority. And right next to him is Joanne Kago. Joanne Kago is the Senior Training Officer, Base Titanium. Our topic of discussion yet again is the recognition of prior learning. If we may just begin by them helping us understand what prior learning is all about. So if I may start with you, Dr. Alice, what is prior learning, recognition of prior learning?
Thank you so much, Vivian, and good morning, everyone. Rightly said, my name is Alice Kande, Acting CEO of the Kenya National Qualifications Authority. And allow me, first of all, to say where we come in before we talk about recognition of prior learning. The Kenya National Qualifications Authority is an agency under the Ministry of Education, State Department for TVET. And our role is basically to coordinate, harmonize, and ensure credibility of qualifications, academic qualifications across board, from the lowest level of training to the highest level of training, and even getting to the professional pathway. So anything that amounts to a certificate, it needs to be ascertained of its credibility. And that is where we come in to ensure that there are policies that will enable us as a country to enforce that which we are envisioning of credible certificates. And that is where recognition of prior learning comes in, because we realize and recognize as a country that learning does not just happen in class. We appreciate that as a country we've had a system that has worked for us and a system that has seen most of us go through school. But at the same time, we know there are some people, for one reason or another, they have not found themselves in that classroom setup and even being able to progress so that they are able to move from one level to another. And we also find that those people also make something meaningful where they are, probably in the industry. And so this is where now what we implement as the Kenya National Qualifications Framework provides a pathway for recognition of any skill or competence that one has acquired outside the formal education and training. Because you already have a structured way of ascertaining. You know, when I go to class, there's a very clear way of how I'm going to progress, say, from grade 1 to grade 2 to high school to college to the level 10, which is the highest level. But then again, when we talk about the skill pathway, which is one of the 3 pathways we have in the Kenya National Qualifications Framework, then we recognize that we need to find a way of identifying and assessing that skill that I'm able to acquire outside of a classroom setup. And this is now what is being addressed by the policy that we're calling recognition of prior learning. Thank you.
All right, so maybe why is it important for us to adopt this learning? It's quite new, if you may correct me if I'm wrong. So why is it important, Peter?
Thank you. Vivian and my colleague panelists. I come from the National Industrial Training Authority, and we say that the authority is responsible for regulating the training of persons who are engaged in the industry. So when we talk about persons engaged in industry, so we look at them from a training perspective. There's a person who is at the workplace whose sole responsibility is to acquire skills, whether knowledge or practice for the purposes of furtherance, etc. So if we flip the side of recognition of prior learning, we have had very many people who have acquired skills within the workplace, whether the formal workplace or the informal workplace. For a long time, those skills have not been recognized. The country has not given them the weight it deserves. We have for a long time only looked at people who have gone through academic training as the ones who have what it takes to get into jobs, rise in jobs, etc. But the country has come to a realization is that the majority of the persons that we have at the workplace are the ones who have acquired skills within that particular space. So the issue is, how do we then also recognize those skills for the purposes of giving these people advantages just like any other person. And when we talk about these skills, we are not only talking about the people who are in the informal sector. We are talking about the people who have acquired skills even within the formal sector. For instance, my colleague here is from a formal industry. We are working a lot with them for the purposes of recognizing skills of their workers. There are production systems that are not taught anywhere in this country. The people who work within the environment can only learn those skills within the workplace. So after they acquire those skills or learn those skills within the workplace, how do we then tomorrow empower them to go and work in any other establishment if they were to work in any other establishment? The only persons who know that they have those skills is the employer who has currently employed them. So if that person leaves the gate of the employer, they cannot say that they have any other skill. So recognition of prior learning is coming in then to give formal certification and recognition to those skills so that these people can progress. Within the informal sector also, we have hundreds of thousands of people who have gotten into that space and are acquiring skills on day-to-day basis. However, nobody recognizes those skills. And mark you, these are the people who are running the economy. If we say that, employment in the informal sector accounts for 83% of our employment in Kenya, then you can imagine how many people are in that space, how many people are running through that space, but nobody recognizes them. So we have moved as an authority into that particular space to give meaning to those skills. And for instance, we are working with the National Affordable Housing Project, where we moved into the various sites for the purposes of assessing those people on the ground working on those particular sites, so that if you work on site A and tomorrow you must move to site B, you don't have to carry a crowd of people to show that you have a skill, but the certificate that is given, which is recognized through the Kenya National Qualifications Authority, then can enable you to move from one site to another or even join the formal sector training if you so wish to join. Thank you. Yeah.
So who exactly does it benefit? Does it benefit everyone? I mean, even someone who has a degree, can they benefit from it, or who exactly is benefiting from prior learning, the recognition of prior learning?
Thank you, Vivian. Good morning, everyone. The recognition of prior learning is across board. Let me take a case study. For example, in the studio, like we are today, there's somebody who came in, probably started with record management, and right now probably is here in the production area, but doesn't have any certification of that. And or we could be having yourself who has gone to school and you've studied your mass communication in what you're doing, but you have a complementary skill that you have learned on the job, probably videography. And you've done this for probably maybe 2 years, 3 years, and it's a skill that you've learned. Now, recognition of prior learning states that you don't have to go back to school and study for that. You already have the skill. All you need to do is go back to the institution, be assessed for that skill without having to go through the normal learning structure. Because what they do is they use learning outcomes where they'll ask you questions. We call them the pre-assessment and assessment areas. They'll ask you questions in relation to the skill that you have gained. So when we speak about recognition of prior learning, it touches on everyone. It doesn't matter if you have a PhD, because you could be having a skill that you've learned that has not yet been assessed, but you feel the need of having it assessed and recognized. So it's open to everyone.
So, for example, if I may still take my case, as I'm working here as a journalist, a broadcast journalist, but probably I didn't learn editing in school, but from being here, I've learned how to edit and I'm good at it. So I just go back to school and get assessed for it, but I don't need to go through the classes. Is that what it means? And then do I get certification for it to show that I'm a certified, probably, editor? Is that the case?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes, Vivian, that's the case, because saying that where it comes into address is to also avoid duplication of effort, because saying if you have already acquired that skill, why do we want to take you back again to class to learn the same things that you very well know how to do them? But we will still have to take you through a rigorous, well-structured process. So that
I would love for you, sorry for cutting you short, but I would love for you to take me through that process. How does it look like from the start?
Thanks so much. Yes, this process, which we're saying that it will not be taken as a shortcut to a certificate, well structured to ensure that from the point of where you're being identified as one who is suitable for assessment, we have people who will be able to really scrutinize you based on the evidence that you are providing. As it is, recognition of prior learning is purely evidence driven. It is based on the portfolio of the evidence that you can produce. This is what I have done, because it's not just about just speaking. Of course, talking about it, but then provide this evidence that shows us really that I have been doing this and I am capable of doing this. So essentially then where we start is that you will present yourself to an institution that has that mandate to assess. And when I say an institution that has a mandate, this is where now KNQA again comes in to ensure that we work with institutions that we call qualifications awarding institutions, so that it is not just any other institution that you will go to and you tell them to assess you for this skill and then they give you a certificate. Of course, you know there are many who turn certificates and if they are not credible, then they are not. We've been talking about fake and fraudulent certificates. And so even in this context, we'll also ensure that we stick to those certificates that are of quality, that again have been issued by a credible institution. So when you present yourself to an institution, then practitioner that we call an RPL practitioner, because again this will be someone who has a clear understanding of this process of recognition of prior learning, because basically it is different from the usual way of taking a book and having class, taking you to class and teaching you, you have a clear context of what it is you need to cover the whole term. This is different. You're coming to be assessed for what you have. So there has to be someone who really understands that context as well. So that is the RPL practitioner. So they'll take you from the first level, they get to gauge you at that initial level, and then they will see whether for the evidence that you're providing, would you be suitable for assessment at probably the level that you yourself are coming to be assessed at? For instance, you said you would want to be assessed at, say, diploma level, which we call level 6. Probably given what now you have produced, they may guide that with this, you need to be assessed at maybe a higher or a lower level. And from there, then you will also be assessed practically, and that is why where my colleagues come in and the industry comes in, because we would want to see you do that which you're saying that you have skill for it, and that now marks the gauging part of it, that you really have that skill and competence. And the good thing and the unique thing about recognition of prior learning is its flexibility and the acknowledgement that no one is a failure, because if really I am saying that I can do it, probably not to meet the set criteria or the set target, so I will be able to be told that this is the gap that you have. As far as video editing is concerned, yes, you can do this to this level, but for you to be certified at level 2, level 3, then you would need to go fill this and these areas, and so you would be sent probably back to where you're working, and over time you will be able to acquire those skills again. So really we're saying that no one is a failure. We leverage that which every individual has and try to bring them up so that it can also help them as well. And so we are confident that if we follow that process as it is, then we will be able to get people who are taking advantage of something that they can actually do for themselves. And what a beauty, you know, when what I do and what I like doing and what I do very well is really recognized. And the beauty of this is that once I am assessed, and you see we're saying that you're assessed by a credible institution. If we're looking at NITA, or we look at, if we look at the TVET pathway, we also have like our national polytechnics that are also accredited. Then that certificate that they give does not say that it is an RPL certificate. It is a certificate like any other, because the learning outcomes are mapped against what we have clearly provided for what it is that we expect of every level. every level I'm in. For a degree, we call it level 7. Whether I am going through the academic pathway, you go to class, or whether I am being assessed through recognition of prior learning, I should be able to demonstrate that I can meet these requirements, these outcomes that are provided for this level. So it is a certificate like any other for that particular level, and so it gives me an opportunity then to be able to even get to the formal education pathway and then be able to progress upwards, or even just use that certificate then to be recognized by the labor market, by the employer, because really it shows that I am equal to the task for that particular level. So yes, it is a rigorous process that we're glad that we've been able to really have them well curated and provided in several instruments other than the recognition of prior learning policy. We have implementation guidelines. We have other critical tools that then the implementing agencies are able to use just to make sure that it is done in a harmonized and standardized manner.
So there are different levels to it, same as the traditional way of education assessments, whereby there's you can get your certificate, you get your diploma, you get your degree, you go for, so there are different levels to RPL as well.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
What my colleague is saying there is very true. So from 2018, the country adopted what we call the Kenya National Qualifications Framework, which is run within our authority. So we say it's a 10-level framework for national qualifications in Kenya. So the lowest qualification is level 1, the highest qualification is level 10.
Okay.
So level 1 are primary school qualifications, level 2 secondary school qualifications, across the various pathways. And she says that we have regulators, about 4 or 5 sectors within that framework. So we have what we call basic education, which deals with primary and secondary education. We have the TVET framework, where we have TVET programs. We have higher education, and we have skills, where I represent at the National Industrial Training Authority. So if probably I speak to that very framework of skills, then we have about 7 levels for qualifications that we offer. So, and basically, we begin from traditional to current. We have what we call the government train test, which has been the certification for fundis in Kenya for a long time, artisans, etc. So which is placed at level 2 of the qualification framework up to level 8 of the qualifications framework. So when you come to us, or we come to you, the claimant that you have a skill, so we use that framework as the mirror for where we should place you. So in essence, what we have done, for each of those levels with the various sectors, we have developed standards in the name of occupational standards that my colleague has spoken to. So for each industry, whether it is this industry or any other industry, we have sat with the experts in that field to tell us, if we have a person at level 2, what should they be able to do? If we have a person at level 3, what should they be able to do? It's not us who have said. It is the industry that has told us. So if we come to Vivian, Vivian claims she is able to do all these things that she knows. So we put her against that mirror. And it is not us, it is our peers. Because the persons that we bring on board for assessment are the workers within that particular environment. Then gurus who already have qualification. So they are the ones that will tell us, if Vivian is saying she can be able to do all these things, or she knows all these things, then we couldn't place her at level 5 or at level 6. So, and then as my colleague says about the process, having claimed is not an end by itself. So we will go further to Prof. Vivian. What evidences can you provide to justify all those things that you provided? So we have experts that will sit with you, gather evidence, provide whatever you will provide, whether it is the testimonials, real work life experiences, videos of you doing whatever you have done, all sorts of evidences that you can be able to gather. And against what you claimed and what you provide, then we engage you again, whether you still are at that level, or probably you are even at a superior level or at an inferior level, on the basis of what you submitted as evidence. Because what sometimes we realize, when people come to make the oral submissions, sometimes they talk too big of themselves, or too retro of themselves. So we have to ensure that, the oral submissions combined with the evidences that they provide about themselves, combining the two, then we place you at an appropriate level. And once it is established that then you belong to level 1 or level 10, then you are taken through the formal assessment processes of that level, as will be undertaken by any examination body. So you may appear in an exam with other people, And you are through at PL, where them they are through the formal sector education. So when you are sitting in the exam room, nobody knows this is at PL or this is through the formal education and training, because as he's saying, at the end of the process, whatever you get a qualification does not write at PL, does not rather in at PL, sorry.
Okay.
It is a qualification as won't be awarded to any other person who has gone through formal education and training in that particular sector.
All right.
Yeah.
So for someone who's watching us right now and they love this idea and they would love to get into it, where does one, you know, apply for recognition of prior learning?
That's a good question. This week, we'll be launching the recognition of prior learning policy framework and graduation for close to 721 beneficiaries or participants who have been with us for the pilot. With that launch, then it opened doors to the national polytechnics, the National Industrial Training Authority, the TVET sectors, and many more. But Kande will be able to give it at a broader perspective because they are the ones who are regulating which institutions have been able to be allowed to do that. But if I could add something before Kande jumps in is just to give people faith in the lines of recognition of prior learning. When assessment is being done, especially the practical part, there are 3 people who are involved to ensure credibility of this. So you said like editing, there's definitely a practical part that is going to be required for you. There are 3 people who will be there, the RPL expert, the industry expert, and the assessor. The 3 of them will gauge you differently, and everybody is going to give their mark. That is what then is going to help them in putting you in which level that you're going to be assessed for. And just like Dr. Kande said rightfully, nobody fails in the recognition of prior learning because you also get 3 outcomes out of it. You can either get a full qualification where you meet everything in the learning outcomes. You can get a partial qualification where your skill was only addressed or specific to a certain thing, or you can get a statement of attainment. So in RPL, there's quite a lot in it, and everybody benefits. Nobody fails because there's something for everyone. Dr. Kande, you can pick up on the other one.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that clarification, Joanne. And yes, like you rightly said, where do we go?
Yeah.
We are very keen to ensure that the certificate so obtained from recognition of prior learning is one that will stand the test of time, one that will not be challenged, and if so challenged, then we are able to really say that, look, we've gone through and ticked all the boxes that would be required of a credible certificate, of a certificate that would not just be useful for me here where I am, but I would be able to also carry it, and probably even beyond our boundaries, it would be portable and enable me to even get a job elsewhere, because that is the essence of having globally competitive qualifications. And this also applies for certificates that are required through recognition of prior learning, just like any other. And so, like we rightly said, then that within the national qualifications framework, we're still talking about the 3 sub-frameworks that we have. Allow us to keep talking about that because that is our reference point. We did talk about the academic, and for the academic is where we generally begin from the lowest level to the highest, assuming that when I get to primary school, I'll go directly to the university. So I will be working with even the basic education at that level, and then I will go to the university and probably to the highest level. So when I get to the highest level, I will be at university level. And at that level, we have a regulator, that is the Commission for University Education. At the lower level, for the basic, primary and secondary, we also have the Directorate of Quality Assurance at that level. So that at every level, we have a body that we work with to ensure quality of qualifications and to ensure that we are just working with the credible institution. So, for instance, Commission for University Education will ensure that we just work with the chartered universities and also for accredited programs.
Because my next question was actually on, are you working with specific institutions? Are there specific institutions that offer the recognition of prior learning?
Absolutely, and that is then what would answer this, because we have to close in on those ones that have that credibility also and that legal mandate to undertake that task. So when we get to the TVET pathway, where this is where now we have our national polytechnics, and why we are zeroing in on national polytechnics, because we're looking at that institution that is legally mandated to issue what you call a national certificate. You'll agree with me that especially at TVET space, we have so many other institutions. You know, this country for very many years, we've really been yearning for learning, and there are also people who've taken advantage of people who've been seeking education and just establishing an institution and admitting people and just giving them certificate. Unfortunately, you'd find that those certificates do not really meet the required criteria, so we cannot really term them as national certificates. And remember, for recognition of prior learning, we're saying that that which will be assessed, it will be considered as equivalent to any other certificate that one has been given, maybe through formal education and training. And so it needs to really make sure that it meets what is required of that particular level. So we will not then have every other institution, probably wherever it is, and it has not followed the criteria for it to be called a qualification awarding institution, to assess people and give them certificates. And if they do so, then that then adds to what you're calling the fake certificates, because they are not then they have not, first of all, met the requirement of being issued by a credible qualification awarding institution. When we get to the skill pathway, then this is where the National Industrial Training Authority comes in. But then we're not saying that, for instance, in the skills pathway, it isn't only NITA that can do it. Now, NITA, and my colleague will tell you, that now they rope in other players. But there is that specific clause where it comes to now issuance of that certificate, because it's very critical. So we have a structured way in which all these players work in. So for instance, when you get to the TVET space, we also know we have technical training institutions. So we also have their role and what they will ought to do, so that now they link up with the national polytechnics, who will be issuing the national certificate. Because our, for instance, the TVC, Technical Vocational College, or a VTC, or a technical training institution will not issue a national certificate. But there's a way now, it is very clear, and also through the framework, that they will be able to link with that qualification awarding institution, so that we are just getting that harmonized certificate from those credible qualifications awarding institutions. And so, to answer your question very simply, yes, there are specific institutions that then would be able to do this task of assessing and awarding certificates through RPL. Yes.
All right, and on that note, we'll take a short break. Don't you go too far. We'll be back to continue with this conversation. Good. Thank you for staying with us, and we are back, and we are talking about the recognition of prior learning. And maybe to you, Peter, for someone who's watching us and hasn't yet understood, how different is this from the traditional education assessments? How would you say it's different from the traditional way of assessing people academically?
Thank you, Vivian. Probably for starters, we say that RPL is supposed to make the invisible visible, from the point of having a qualification, having a paper that has quantified the skills that you have. So we are looking at this person who has a lot of skill, but that skill has not been quantified. Those of us who have gone through the academic and training line, our skills have been quantified, because we ran, sat for exams, we got certificates. So by use of that paper, we have done all this that we're able to do. Now you have this person whose only environment within which they have learned. A particular skill that is giving them bread for life today is within the workplace, but nobody has recognized this process. So what now we are bringing in from the point of RPL is that the systems that have been put in place is to ensure that we quantify that skill by giving a certificate. And this is what we are doing. We have identified various assessment centers for RPL because it is an assessment, it's not a training. We are simply coming to assess the skill that we have and engage it appropriately. So we have within, if I may talk for NITA, NITA has accredited about 1,500 assessment centers all over the country. And why we have done that is to ensure access, that from where you are, you do not have to travel far for you to get that service. These centers are, some are training institutions which have, you know, a model, an industry model framework in terms of equipment and people that are in there. We also have workplaces, workplaces in the informal sector. And the best example that I can give for these workplaces in the informal sector, we have salons. We have hundreds of salons which are assessment centers for people who are doing hairdressing. We have hundreds of garages that we have accredited for people who are doing, you know, automotive engineering. We have work sites where people are doing construction that we have accredited. And the essence for that is to help us assess people who are in that particular building and construction industry. We have the formal sector employer where my sister sits. We have a number of institutions within there that we have accredited that are our assessment center. So once we develop our assessment standards, then we take these standards to that environment. So it is upon us to come to where you are and assess you on the basis of what you are able to do within that particular sector. Now, in terms of weight, because for instance, from where we sit, when we look at the lower level skills, the lower level qualifications that we have, we realize that the people who are praised at the shop floor, their main job is to do. So then they use their hands more frequently. So then you find our assessment framework at the lower level has close to 90% of practical skills assessment as opposed to the theory assessment. So we have a weight of 90, 90-10. Why? Because on day-to-day basis, this person is involved in doing. So as you move higher, you have components of decisions here and there and deciding it the same. But when you look at the majority of the people that we look at that lower level, we lay a lot of emphasis on their abilities to do. So you will find an assessment standard that only speaks to do one or two. And number two, why we emphasize it at that level, remember there is a component of the language. Sometimes we argue that skills have no language. If you are able to do my hair, it doesn't matter whether you speak Kikuyu or you speak Ruei. So we don't want to lay emphasis on the abilities that are on these other sides for some levels. All what we want you to do is to demonstrate ability to do this. And that way, we have been able then to call upon those who have these skills and they have not been certified to come on board and get those skills recognized appropriately at that particular level. However, as she says, within the 10-level framework, we have, you know, we have 3 parameters that we look at when we are doing that assessment. We have that component of ability to do in terms of skills. Then we also have the component of the knowledge. What should you be knowing? Even as you do this here at this level, even as you do journalism at this level, what should you be knowing? So we even assess that ability of what you know in terms of knowledge. But also importantly, we have the component of the attitude that we are supposed to demonstrate and portray for a given level of a skill. So when we come in that threefold, and the assessment framework that we create is that threefold. It is simple, but as he's saying, the whole reason is to ensure that we do not subject you into what you already know. However, we realize that sometimes when we put you against the standard that I said, which is the parameter against which we assess you, sometimes we find people have gaps. Sometimes we recommend that for you, you couldn't be good. You could get what she talks of three outcomes. The full qualification, the partial qualification, or the statement of attainment. Sometimes we tell a person, you could have gotten a full qualification, but you need to sharpen this area and this area in terms of skills exposure before you come for that final assessment for us to put you into the full qualification. So then we have a component that we call skills gap training. So the people we find with gaps, then we refer them to institutions, whether workplace or training institution, for the purposes of that small top-up, let me call it top-up training for now, so that then you get into being assessed as a food person. But hitherto, where we have done our best and realized that that is the best you can get, so we then either allow that you have the food qualification, the path qualification, or the statement of attainment.
As you had mentioned earlier, the first cohort has around 721, right, who are graduating in on the 22nd of this month.
Yes.
And as Mr. Peter has said, it's an assessment, it's not a training. So how long, like the time frame for these ones who are graduating, how long have they been going through the assessment, as it's not a training?
Thank you, Vivian. That's a good question. For this question, allow me to fall back to my industry. I work for a mining company in Kwale, based titanium. We started this journey with the Kenya National Qualifications Authority and the National Industrial Training Authority back in 2021, where in May, where we were assessing 6, because it was the initial first pilot. Our institution was going to provide six people. Countrywide, I think there were 36 for the first pilot. And all they needed was just them to go to an assessment center. But before that, there is what I mentioned earlier, something that we call the pre-assessment, where we have the institutions coming to their workplace. Like Peter has mentioned that they have accredited some of the workplaces, base being one of them, for assessment. So they came to their workplace. We had our people at the workstation, where now they had the interviews one-on-one, verbal, and they would be asked questions. I want you to appreciate RPL in the sense of language. Not everybody can speak English, not everybody can speak Swahili, but there are those people who can be able to speak their skill in a language that is well known, just like Njiru has said. And what we do is you bring in an interpreter during the one-on-one assessment, where you are allowed to respond in a language that you feel comfortable in, to demonstrate your understanding and knowledge of what is in question at that point. So once they do the assessment, the verbal assessment, they're given an assessment paper where it demonstrates what they need to do next. The next stage is they're going to do a practical assessment. That is the time now we bring in the industry expert, we bring in the RPL expert, and an assessor in a kind of way for us to be able to know, does this person move forward? Do they understand this skill they want to be assessed? Because speaking it could be different from doing it. So now we want to know, does the doing match the speaking? So they do the assessment. All this is in a one-week framework, and they do the item that they have been requested to do. For example, welding. You have been asked to do a joint, a certain kind of joint, and it has to have 1, 2, 3, 4. As you do your welding, you're also supposed to be providing your evidence, your portfolio of evidence of previous work done, so that they can be able to match and say, indeed, what you did and what you're doing now, is it the same? And also it helps to gauge on your growth, because what you started with is definitely not what you're going to produce. So once you pass that level, now you're going to be questioned on, not questioned, they're going to give you a final decision on which level you're going to be assessed. When I walked in, I felt like I was probably a certificate level person. But after they look at what I have done, they felt that I'm going to be a certificate 2 person. So they're going to tell me they're going to put me for assessment on level 2. That's where I'm going to be assessed. So from that point, we wait for the qualification awarding institution to set the exams and tell us when the exams are going to be carried out. The exams are very simple. It's a day or 3 days assessment, depending on the level you have been accredited for, or the level you're going to be assessed to do. When you go for the assessment, you do 10% theory and 90% practical, right? And from that, remember, we are looking at your skills. We are not interested in your theory, but we've already looked at your theory using the learning outcomes at the workplace. And what you're going to produce is what now makes a final decision, and we'll get the results in 3 to 6 months for you to be able to know where you are. Why I'm speaking about that is, and why I like the recognition of prior learning. It's a pathway to open job opportunities for people who have gone to employers seeking employment. And the first thing you're asked is, you're a carpenter, what do you have to show me? And they say, I want to demonstrate. And salaries are discussed at that point. And they say, I'll give you salary X. In 6 months, I'm going to give you a raise if I see what you're doing. But most of the time, it doesn't happen. But now, the recognition of prior learning will give you that certificate. You'll go in, you'll be able to bargain for your job, and it's also going to open the industry for Kenyans, even in the formal sector, where somebody is moving from the informal sector now, as a qualified mechanic, can now come and bring their papers into the formal sector and be employed. They no longer have to demonstrate because they have the paper. But technically, for the pre-assessment and the assessment, 1 week. For the assessment, 1 to 3 days, depending on the level that you have been subjected to do.
Okay, I get that. Now, is every experience and every prior learning recognized under RPL? Every single experience, every single prior learning, or there are specifics?
Thanks, Vivian. Yes, like we say, recognition of prior learning is aimed at providing inclusion. And so we can say that, yes, every experience, every skill can be recognized within the space of recognition of prior learning. For as long as now, within the institutional context, we've been able to make sure that we put up all the instruments, all the tools that will be required for one to be assessed for each and every of those skills that are there. And what you're doing just to make sure that then we enhance these inclusion bits is to work with the labor market. And my colleague Jiru spoke to that, that when it comes to even those skills that are to be assessed, and since we're saying that they are being assessed against already provided learning outcomes, already we have an expectation of what is it that we expect you to demonstrate. Now that has been informed by the industry itself. So this is what we call the occupational standards, which actually has a breadth of the industry itself. So they will provide, they will tell us this and these are the skills that we are looking at. And so we endeavor to make sure that that which the industry needs is what we are churning out from our institution. And these are the gaps also that recognition of prior learning comes to fill in. So that of course, we've been hearing about getting graduates from our institutions, which, of course, we know there's a lot of work that is happening in our formal institutions. But we also realize that there has been a gap in terms of graduates getting to the workplace. And then there's that bit of mismatch. They're coming with the paper, but they're not rightly fitting, because there has been a gap between what is it that the industry requires and what it is that you are trading. And so what we are seeing then recognition of prior learning doing is actually even seeking what is it then that the industry exactly needs. So to be very precise, so that we are filling in those gaps that for time immemorial we've been talking about it. That you know, the labor market says you are not really giving us the people that we need. And so all those competencies that are required, as long as my colleague said, I am able to put bread on my table because of that skill that I have, then it can be assessed through recognition of prior learning. And so we are then working together right from where we sit as KNQA in ensuring that the policy speaks to the process, and also now the implementers themselves, where they sit. Do we have all those skill areas identified? And allow me to say that at this point in time, of course, we are at our early stages of rolling it out. From the piloting phase that we had, we realized that we need to open it up. Of course, during the piloting phase, we were quite careful because we just used 3 trade areas because it was a testing ground. Again, we didn't want to bite so much then we can swallow. We also wanted to make sure that we address any gaps that could be there. But we also realized that it is important to identify those areas that have potential for our people, because again, probably it is not all areas that will really have that keen interest for prior learning. So we want to look at what are those specific areas. And I want to appreciate that through International Labour Organization that has been a key partner even for us in developing of this policy, recognition of prior learning. They are currently helping us to identifying those occupational centers that we can run with for now, so that we are not going to leave anyone out. So we want to bring them out, we flag them out, and make sure that we are able to really provide for assessment way of for all those skill areas that we identify. Yes.
Maybe what are some of the misconceptions that you've had that are around recognition of prior learning, and what are you doing to demystify these misconceptions?
Thank you. The first one, which comes to mind immediately, has been the notion that RPL is for dishing out certificates. I think it's the biggest misconception that we have had, where the academic side feels that we are now coming to distort the academic ecosystem, that we are now telling people from now on, no schooling, you just go for certificates. It's a big misconception that probably I can illustrate. When we were doing the pilot, phase 1 and phase 2, the total number of applicants who came showing interest in the 3-4 trend areas that we were looking at was about 1,200. So when people hand this RPA, this pilot in the various areas, because we are dealing with automotive technology, we are dealing with hairdressing and beauty, and the fourth one was the welders and people in that particular environment, the mechanical areas we call it. About 1,000 people came. They came in their numbers en masse because they knew today is the day for us to get certificates. So when they were done the first screening to gauge what they have, about 400 were dropped. They were found to be not having anything substantial to be engaged against the standards that we talked about. So the 700 went through the process of then being guided on building adequate evidence to lay a claim onto what they were saying. And out of the 700, only about 400 were determined to be okay. So those are the people who went for the final assessment. From the 400 who went for the final assessment, only about half of them managed to get a full qualification. The rest got partial and statement of attainment. So that erased that particular fear, because from what my colleague presented, from the start to the end, we have put in adequate quality assurance mechanisms to ensure that then nobody gets in if they are not supposed to get in. For instance, when you get screened for the first time, the person who then judges that you have a skill for where you can provide evidence is not the person who evaluates that evidence. And that is objective, that is deliberate. Because already we argue that this person who then qualifies you to bring the evidence has already determined that you have something. But we want another independent person to determine, to agree with that particular individual. And we have now instances where, whereas on the first stage, you are determined to be what you are, at the second level it was determined, this one, there was a mistake here and there. Probably you talked too much and convinced that person too much. But the point of providing evidence, bando. Then when we went to the third stage, where she says that we have about 3 prayers on the final assessment, because then you have the RPL expert, you have the industry expert, and you have the trainer. When those people are there, you cannot pass through if you are not supposed to pass through. And all that we are putting adequate quality assurance mechanisms to ensure then that notion that RPL is for a way of dishing out certificates is not the narrative. Number 2, we have this other notion that RPL is for the people in the informal sector only, the Juakari sector. Capital N, capital O, no. It is for, among others, those people who have acquired skills within the informal sector. Because what we are looking at is people who have run, what we say, running non-formally and running informally. Okay? Those people who have run formally, oriented structures are there for them to get certificates and get qualification. But those people who have run non-formally and informally do not have particular privileges of that. And that's why within the workplace, where non-formal learning takes place, running an informal workplace, all those skills are supposed to be taken. Another another category of people who have run from home. And on this, I give a good example. If we were to be given 3 plates of ugari here, we'll get ugari from a chef who has gone to Utari. We'll get ugari from Joan, who is working in the hotel industry, but out of cleaning utensils and interest, she has learned how to cook ugari. Then we'll get ugari from you, who has learned from your mom how to cook ugari. When we have the 3 ugaris, we really can't tell. It's not written. This one is from Utari, this is from home, this is from the industry. And probably if we sample, I'll not be shocked if we say your ugari, which you learned how to cook from your mom, is better than, you get. So this RPR is not only for those who then are in some sector. It's for everybody. As long as your skills have not been amplified, they have not been quantified, then RPR is for you. So we are not talking about, we are not limiting it to sectors, rather. No, we are open to all sectors. But as he says, as NITA, we are within the Ministry of Labor. So where labor market information is. So within us, we have what we call sector training committees that we work with for the purposes of then tell us which are the priority sectors. For instance, now we are moving to, let me use the example, the affordable housing project, where we have so much youth who are in that particular sector. They have no certificate. Some have worked for years. We are moving on to them. When the president is making a clarion call for labor migration, remember, it's only a person who has a quantified skill that can even leave Kenya to work out there if they so want to access those job opportunities. So how then will they go there? And there's nothing that they can show for these very, very skills. So as we work with all the sectors, then we are putting from a priority level, which are these in line where people are much run on the job, they don't have these skills recognized, so that we take it to them for the purposes of prioritization. So that component of, as I've said, the misconception, we are dishing out certificates, it's only the informal sector people that are supposed to get a certificate, and been things that we have been struggling with, at the end of the day. And of course, the last one is that I've heard people talk about RPA in forums, and they are saying that you will be given an RPA certificate. There is no certificate called an RPA certificate. And I think my colleague Daktari didn't say that the RPA is a process by itself. But at the end of the day, what you get is a certificate that won't be given to any other person within that particular framework. So if you go to higher education for RPA, you will get your degree or master's or PhD certificate at that time. If you go to TVET, you'll get your craft, artisan, or diploma. If you go to NITA, they will give you their government trained test or national skill, whichever certificate they give to any other person, because at the end of the day, equity. What you get, what I get, doesn't matter the rule that you follow. Thank you.
So it's not written RPL?
No.
Because I actually had, you had mentioned earlier, but I was just, as I'm also learning on the go on this, what is it written? Like it's written, this diploma is awarded to, this degree is awarded to, because I imagine when we're out here seeking for jobs, the requirements normally, ask for, you need to have a degree in this and that. So your certificate is the very same certificate as the one that we get in the traditional learning institutions, as you say. So it depends on the levels. As you've said, there's the full qualification. Yes. So the full qualification is equal to what? Level 7 is equal to what? Level 6 is equal to what? In terms of where are we grading, where are we putting this one? This is a diploma, this is a degree, this is a master's degree.
So, okay. So, I talked of the Kenya National Qualifications Framework, where she is a master in. They are the ones who actually provide that framework for quality assurance and for standardization of all qualifications in Kenya. So, as I attempted to say earlier, if you go to that 10-level framework with the various sectors that I spoke to, I said we have level 1. Level 1 is for people who have KCPE.
Yeah.
So if you go to basic education through RPA, and you are taken through an assessment and you are determined that you can have a KCP certificate, then you will be given a KCP. And probably for starters, all what will happen is that you will meet the formal people at the exam. You will meet during the assessment. You will not go through the training. So meet you at the exam. We sit for an exam like any other person, so you get that level 1. Level 2 is KCSE. Yes.
Okay. Even as you're explaining that, where are we drawing the line? Because I remember you've mentioned this in the misconception, but where are we drawing the line if it is starting from the primary level? You know, where are we drawing the line in, you know, you don't really need to learn?
No, we are not saying you don't really need to learn. We are saying you have already learned.
Okay.
The presumption here is that you already have the knowledge.
Okay.
And the skill.
So when you're talking of the primary level,
yes,
what are we talking about?
So if then it is determined after you are screened,
okay,
that the best you can be, you are equivalent to a person with a primary level qualification.
Okay.
Then if you are so assessed and awarded a qualification, then you will be given a KCPE certificate. You understand? If then you are engaged that all what you have in terms of knowledge, skill, etc. is the equivalent of a KCSE, then you'll be assessed like a KCSE person. If you move to level 3 qualifications, so you have, if you look at the framework, you have what we call, under skills, we have government trained certificates. We have what we call a grade 2 certificate, which is placed at level 3 of the qualifications framework. And at that level also, we have what we call an artisan 3 lowest levels of artisans in this other activity framework. They are placed at that particular level. If you go to level 4, you have the full artisan and activity, but underneath that we have what we call a government trained test 1, equivalent at that level of the framework. If you move to level 5, we have a crafts person. So the people who get craft certificates, or the people who get it from the NITA sign, they call of what they call the master craftspersons certification. They are placed at level 5 of the framework. If you move to level 6, we have the diploma certificate. At the NITA level, I know they have what you call the master craftspersons too. They are all placed at that particular level 6. You move to level 7, you have your first degree, the bachelor's degree, placed at level 7. I know from the NITA sign, they have what they call a master craftspersons 1. If you go to level 8 of the framework, you have the postgraduate qualifications and the professional qualification placed at that particular level. I know from the NITA sign, they have what they call a professional master craftsperson. Then you move to level 9, the master's qualifications is only higher education that has a qualification at that level. And level 10, you have the holders of PhD qualifications. That is the highest that we have in the country. So if you are judged and praised at those particular levels for the purposes of assessment, so if you are then assessed and qualified to be, then you've been given an equivalent certificate as would be given to a person at any of those.
I now understand that. I now understand that completely. Now, maybe what are some of the challenges and barriers that RPL is facing?
Oh, that's a good question. I think Peter spoke part of it as he was giving his speech. One of them is portfolios, the evidence of portfolios in terms of the students. They'll approach the institution and they want to be assessed, like he said, but they don't have what it takes. They're not able to demonstrate, and they feel that they have what is needed for that to be done. That's number one. Number two would definitely be the cost. The recognition of prior learning. As much as we're saying you've been assessed on your skills and knowledge, there's a cost to it for you to be assessed. And the cost is a little bit higher than the normal pathway that we take for the traditional learning. Yes. And we appreciate the National Industry Training Authority for the employers. If you're paying levy, you're able to probably use your levy to help your employees. And the third one probably would be the tool advancements. I believe when you are at your workplace, or when you either on the formal or the informal sector, the tools you use are not the tools you're going to be finding in the training institution. So the difference, it creates a lot of a setback for the students once they go in. And we appreciate the process that is now allowing the student to bring in their tools to the assessment centers, or even the flexibility of the qualification awarding institutions going to the assessment centers to do it for you should the tools be a little bit heavy. Lastly, the misconception, just like you had asked earlier, you don't need to learn. The barrier. So people are coming in and saying, you're giving RPL, so I'm here to be given because RPL is there. So some of those challenges are there, and trying to bring back these discussions like we're doing this morning is clearing the air and, you know, bringing people in and them understanding the process further and how it's going to be done. But I believe in the Kenya National Qualifications Authority. Their website has more information on what the recognition of prior learning is and what information they need, who can be able to benefit from this, and how they can be able to benefit from this. Yeah.
Speaking of the cost, can we give it a figure? Can we get a figure on just how expensive it is?
Yes and no, because we are still on course with the exact figure that we would place for assessment for each and every level. But when we were undertaking the piloting phase, we worked with a figure of 25,000. And institutions that really undertook that, the assessment bodies especially, they would tell you that probably that was a bit on the lower side, depending on the level one is looking at, because of course rigor varies with the level. Because the higher it is, the more then we would expect one to provide as much evidence as possible, as you know, as in rigor increases as you go up. If you're looking at probably someone at level one, probably equated to the KCP level, of course the assessment looking at the portfolio and also engagement of that person may not be as intense as one who is at artisan level. Level 4. And so right now we are working on what you're calling differentiated unit cost. And again, I want to appreciate our key partner in this journey, the International Labour Organization. They are working with us in determining the unit cost. We realize, just like the way we have it in our formal education system, because again, remember we're saying that we are not running away from our education system. We are actually embedding RPL on the current education system. And so just like there we know we have it differentiated across levels in the formal education and training, the traditional way, similarly, we also expect it to be differentiated. And so we already have a draft report that gives some laws of about 15,000, a range of 15,000 to about 30,000, but something we're still looking at, because again we're looking at what is the essence of this. The bottom line is that this policy should provide an opening to those that probably were disadvantaged because of the cost that we have in this other system. So if again it comes with that higher cost, then again we might not be addressing the gap that we are looking at, amongst them being the affordability. And so we are looking at then at creative and innovative ways of making it as affordable as possible, looking at how institutions can make it at least reachable to that segment that we are targeting. And so figures are there. And very soon we will have a firmed up figure to give. But I can say at least we have something that guides the institution on how to determine, because already we are rolling out. They are able to determine for all those phases, how is it that you can cost it. But allow me also to just echo what my colleague Joanne has rightly said about the challenges that we're facing, and rightly put. But I also want to say that, of course, seeing that we are at initial phases right now, it's still a new concept, misconception being there, the low publicity that is there. And so this is where we ride on stakeholders like yourself. We want to appreciate that even the media has been very, very keen trying to understand this, because our hope is that we would all understand RPL for what it is. Because again, if we just let everyone speak to what they think it is, then we shall be giving that misinterpretation of it. And so we are looking at having a very well-driven publicity drives, and we want to hope that now with that kind of publicity we would be able to ensure that every stakeholders, including even the targeted beneficiary, understands what RPL is and the expectation, so that we do not just get people saying that we are going to be issued certificate twende pale, their certificates being issued. No, they will get to know that it is really a structured program that is targeted to address that which that other system has not addressed. Yes.
All right, maybe how can employers and other educational institutions come in to support recognition of prior learning?
Thank you. As I said earlier, we have within our backyard, because then we are working with assessment bodies, we have accredited many to roll out this. Actually, what we agreed with the KNQA is that from 23rd of March, it's all systems go. From where I sit in ITA, we have tens of companies that have already written requesting us to move into their space to assess their workers. But we have said, hold on kidogo. Before we have this whistle that will be blown on 22nd, no time yet. So out of the requests that we have been receiving is that then we have been working behind the scenes then to come up with standards. Because as Joan said, part of the challenge that we may have, a big one, is if people come in mass in the various areas. And you see, you can't determine, you know, people will be in which fields when they come. So the expectation is that by the time they come, individuals will come, groups will come, and the expectation is that you have products for them. So we are partnering with employers at a bigger scale. Within the labor sector, we work very closely with the Federation of Kenya Employers, who is a major player in this very environment. So that component of diffusing information to among sector employers to bring their people for assessment, to participate and to take advantage of this particular initiative, we are working closely with them at that particular level. On the informal sector level, we are working with the Kenya National Federation of Jua Career Association, and they have been massive in terms of pushing to ensure that, you know, this works out, reaching out to their constituents, reaching out to their, you know, umbrella bodies that they have within the country for this to happen. And notably, even when we are doing the pilot, these are some of the bodies that we worked with for the purposes of that component of identification. Within the labor sector, it is something that we call social dialogue, where we the regulator, does not reach out to beneficiaries alone, that we work with this ecosystem of employee organization to reach out to them. And of course, you realize for us to determine that this is an area of priority, then of course you have to work with the sector players within for you to be able to engage what is higher, what is lower in terms of approaching. Because even then, that is the partnership that then brings that component of the funding. That, you know, Base Titanium has spent quite some, I don't know whether colossal amounts of money will be a right English one. They have spent quite some money in ensuring that almost all employees that have acquired skills within that space and have no certification go through certification. So they have borne the cost on behalf of the employees. And NITA has been there several times doing this. Even now, it's only that we are not talking on air. Joan will be asking, when are you coming to conclude a number that is waiting? But I think I have answered our question that we are waiting for the whistle on Friday the 22nd for us to be able to move into that very space. The body, the International Labour Organization has been massive in terms of support. At the National Outing Project, I think we worked with KCMB Foundation and other players that have come on board. So there is a lot of partnership through the policy for these bodies that can support, you know, this very process. And my part of the group that we assessed during the pilot were the refugees, I think, in the various camps that we have in this country. So the refugee-based organizations that we have in this country came in full force to ensure that, you know, those people are supported. And even now at the backyard, they are still pushing to have hundreds of thousands of others that were not reached on during the pilot, because you will not reach out to everybody, go through this particular process. So that partnership, guided by KNQ and other players that we're having in these sectors and the industry, is working much for us in order for us to partner and bring all these people into the
Are there maybe, as we come to a close of this conversation, are there success stories that you can share with us so far?
Yeah. We have one of our employees. He's from the local community in Kwale. He joined the organization, I think this is his 7th year. He did not have primary school, high school, and he was a musician when BASE was starting. He joined BASE as in the welding sector, where he was working with the contractors then, and he started learning his skills there. He became a breadwinner for his family, and when the recognition of prior learning came about in 2021, he was one of the people who said, I want to be part of the pilot. And we went through the process with him. Remember, he had no academic qualification whatsoever. All he had were the skills he's had from the years he's been in the industry with us, and learning and also growing through the ranks in promotion. When we did the assessment, he got a grade 1. It's not an easy thing to get a grade 1. It's actually one of the levels that Peter is speaking about, level 3 and level 4. And seeing him speak about it and saying how it has been able to assist him, and also now that he knows, unfortunately we closed the mine this year, knowing that moving forward in his next agenda, he has somewhere he can go and present his paper without him being asked, what are you bringing to the table, without him giving a story of how he got the paper. Because again, the question that is coming about is my certificate being written RPL? No. He provides his grade 1 paper, and he's employed as a welder, a very qualified welder. And I think that's a beautiful story. Somebody from the local community, no education, but here he is doing something that somebody has been in school for and is well qualified. I think that's a beautiful story to write home about.
I agree with you on that. My final question, what advice would you give to someone who is considering RPL?
Come.
Go for it.
Go for it. We have institutions out there, the qualification awarding institutions, the assessment bodies that we have, and I think in the various bodies, whether it is NITA, KNQA, TVETA, TVET, all national polytechnics, I think information will be out there for which institutions that these people can approach for the purposes of that assessment, so that they are then not left out. So we urge people, RPL is here with us, walk into an assessment center, walk into a qualification awarding institution, get information, get screened, get assessed, get your certificates. The players who are, again, for the 4th time I talk, the affordable housing project, part of the key benefit has been to these people that are working in that space without any sort of certification. We are closely working with NCA, that once this person is certified, that they have a skill, can then be given the practicing certificate that NCA gives to people in that particular environment, so that if you leave one site, then through that empowerment you can go to another site and another site without having to express yourself by the papers we speak for you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Like Pierre said, from our end at policy level, then we're also telling the institutions, all these players, that let's all get set for it, because as we tell the candidates to come, then they are finding all of us ready for this. So yes, let them come. We're ready for the assessments.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for just enlightening on this very insightful, conversation. Thank you for that. Right now, I want to hand you over to my colleague, Victor Olo, who is on standby in South Sea at the Kawi Complex Auditorium for the launch of the Nuclear Power and Energy Agency Strategic Plan for the year 2023 to the year 2027. Victor Olo, to you.